Delighted to be joined by Brendan Hall. Brendan, so
Mate.
lovely to see you. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Doing well. Looking forward to finishing out 2023 and making a good start of the next year.
Absolutely right. So go on, let's start at the beginning. Kind of one of 10 people in the world to lead the winning team in the clip around the world. How pivotal was that in your? I mean, clearly it's a massive thing, but kind of in terms of how you thought, what you do, how pivotal was it in your life journey?
Do you know what? It was a defining thing. So I left school not having had the best, results educationally. I did some time in the army, in the Australian army, came out of that and was kind of lost, bounced around a few different jobs, and then finally came across sailing and thought, this is it. I know it's outdoors, it's adventurous, it's what I want to do, that sort of thing. Got into the sailing world, and I'd never been really a competitive sports person ever before, but I started doing sailing racing, and there's this convergence of teamwork and equipment and strategy, and it just sort of, it ticked all the boxes for me mentally. And so I got right into sailing racing, the last thing I thought I'd ever really be doing. And then if you're into your racing and you like it and you want to set the Everest of it is to sail and race all the way around the world. And there are a lot of sort of Formula One style events where you've almost got to be Olympic level talent to even get a look in. But the Clipper race gives people like me who are high quality sailing, good instructors, good communicators, the chance to lead a team and sail around the world on a matched fleet of boats, meaning it's not about which sponsor can throw the most money at the event and build the best vessel. It's very strictly controlled. So it really is a race of 10 teams rather than a race of 10 boats. And yeah, from there, the trajectory of my life was sort of forever changed, having done that experience and won it as well. But, I purely was the skipper. It was my team. It was a collective effort. We all won it together.
So I've got about 55 million questions to ask off the back of that, but let me start at the beginning. When you went into it, were you aware of what it like, of actually what it was and actually what it meant and everything like that, or was it just like, well, this seems like a good challenge to try?
Do you know what it was? And you get this sort of confidence in your late 20s, which is when I did it, and you just sort of think you've got life all figured out, right?
Yeah.
But so I was a sailor, right? Technically very good. I wouldn't say elite, but like up there. And that was my sort of zone of genius, was boats, of tactics, of navigation, of the kind of the nitty gritty, that technical side. Very good at that. And I went into this Clipper race thinking, well, this is it. It's because it's a race of boats, and boats is what I'm good at. So this is going to be great. And I realized really early on that it wasn't a race of boats. It was a race of teams, and it wasn't the best group of sailors that would perform and win, and the skipper with the highest technical knowledge. It was going to be the team that could sustain some like high performance teamwork for 11 months and just grind through all the adversities and challenges you'd face. So actually, I remember in the early days thinking, I kind of got this wrong, and I'll never forget. I had to learn about stuff that at the time was quite unfamiliar to me, having not ever done a sort of corporate leadership background, where you might be exposed to things like, we've got to live our values, and you've got to, have a good vision that keeps people aligned, and you've got to create a culture of empowerment where people feel they can take ownership for things. You've got to, learn from mistakes and experience in a psychologically safe way. I mean, all that learning sort of happened quite quickly in the lead up to this race when I realized it's not about the boats, it's about the people. And that's where competitive advantage is going to be found.
And so 2 questions. I like, again, kind of, if I went and spoke to your teammates, your team at the time, was there a change in you when you had that kind of moment of what a kind of realization, and would they say yes, kind of something he started actually differently, or was it something that actually you were doing differently, but actually you started thinking, like analyzing it?
Do you know what? Yeah, I think it was a lot of it. I think I was doing it without really consciously saying, I need to, do this sort of deliberately. But yeah, they would say definitely the skipper that started that race with them was very different to the one that finished it with them 11 months ago. And I think, it's the journey of life. It's a journey of leadership. It's a journey of parenthood. It's, we learn these things kind of through bitter experience a lot of the time. And actually, I think in a way, reflecting one of my superpowers as a leader was, maybe because I was a bit young and a bit insecure. In fact, I was the youngest of the 10 skippers selected, and that was always kind of in the back of my mind, to prove myself. But because of that, maybe being a little less sort of sure of myself, I was a good listener, and I was good at taking feedback. And so the crew that were very good at sort of saying, look, this is kind of what we need from you in different situations. And I sort of developed this awareness and ability to ask them and not sort of take it all personally, but really invite their feedback. And every stopover around the race, I had a one-to-one with everybody and we talked about it and sort of, yeah, so my leadership really evolved. And I think a lot of that came down to the fact that I was good at listening, probably because I was, feeling a little less sure of myself, but really there were some lessons that I needed to learn. And they told me, my rationale was, right, they're going to be saying this stuff anyway. It's either going to be behind my back to each other on night watch, or I can kind of create a forum where, I can collect this feedback. And yeah, whilst it's never a pleasant thing to hear, it was always done in the right spirit. And that was kind of how I became sort of a better and better leader. And never perfect, but sort of always with the intention to improve.
So let me ask, kind of, I've seen you speak many times and listen, kind of, the speech, kind of you on stage is a fantastic experience and kind of everyone enjoys it. But when you walk into that room, are there signs to you that you've got an audience who are looking for more than just maybe a good time or feeling inspired, whatever it was? Kind of, you talked about kind of people being receptive to feedback. Are there traits from people that you can see naturally about their body language, how they are when they say hello to you, which means that actually they want more than just.
Totally. Well, look, my whole thing as a speaker is that I'm okay with this is not about me. It's about the audience and it's about their outcomes that they're going to get. And in fact, I kind of joke when I talk to clients that, in 6 months' time, people aren't going to remember my name. They'll remember the sailing guy, and that's cool. Yeah. But they'll remember 3 or 4 key things that the sailing guy said. So whenever I sort of approach a client, it's the key questions are like, what do you want people to think, feel, and do differently as a result of my session and how it integrates into, your larger event and its outcomes and how I can kind of reverse engineer that stuff. So yeah, some people want the warm tummy feeling. They want the lovely story. They want the cinematic, and others want some takeaways, some models, some sticky phrases that people are going to really remember. And, so it's always tailored to the outcomes that the organizer.
And how do you adjust yourself to the different requirements, I suppose?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got almost sort of, I suppose, mental blocks of story. So it's about what objectives do they have, and then I always sort of pull down from that bank and put it together. And so yeah, it's all about just finding I sort of where's that slider fall from sort of all story to hard sort of learnings, takeaways, outcomes, and yeah, just. On the day, you can always tell, and if usually I'm following an introduction, or at the end of the day, I'm there for as much of the event as the organizers will sort of let me be there for, and try and keep the sort of flow flowing. So the flow flowing. So as the CEO said earlier on, and sort of work that point in, so it feels like the golden thread is maintained.
And from your perspective, kind of having spoken for a number of years now and always deliver, kind of in terms of the key messages and how you adapt yourself to whether we call it the buzzwords of the moment or we call it actually what kind of companies are focused on. How have you adapted your speech and your content to keep with that kind of where society is at that moment in time?
You're quite right, and I think I try not to just go with the a few years ago it was all about growth mindset, and then it's sort of every year there seems to be this new thing, and I try not to kind of go with that because I've got to be authentic to the story that I have, but the themes around emotional intelligence, and while I can layer on a lot of that language because people are sort of seeing it in social media, it always goes back to a few sort of quite core things that it's about creating an environment where people will step up and take ownership. It's about creating an environment where people understand that their moods affect the moods of the people around them. It's about creating the space for conversation where people can learn from shared experience in a way where they don't feel threatened and they don't sort of self-censor. I mean, so these things, whilst you can talk about psychological safety and, they're lovely kind of a layer to put on top. Really at the core of it, it's a story about how do you get a team of people to perform at their best through, trials and change and adversity. But I suppose at the end of the day, it's a piece of qualitative research with a sample size of 1. It's got this story behind it, kind of is quite emotionally resonant with people. So, that's what I do.
Well, one last question to you. I'm always fascinated about it. What's the best question that you've ever had asked you from an audience after you've spoken? Whether it's the funniest or the most challenging, or the one that gives you the
Oh,
feeling that these guys got it?
yeah,
What do you
yeah.
think?
I think something like, if you had to do it again, would you what would you do differently? And what was your biggest sort of failure on that experience that you want to, you would do differently? And yeah, that's always a challenging one. It is because again, at the end of the day, when I first started speaking, I think I told a much more heroic story, thinking that's what people want to hear. They want to hear about the great things that you did, and this is what they can copy and emulate. But actually, I realized people want to hear about those times where you tried something and didn't get it right, and you learned something important. And I think
Yeah.
we can all relate to those moments a lot better. But yeah, there are a few key things that I definitely would do differently, and if I were to do it again. So that's always a nice question to get asked, and yeah, depending on what I've spoken about that day, it'll link to the themes that they have for the event.
Brendan, thanks so much for your time and on that little tenter hook of kind of what we should be asking you. Appreciate it and have a lovely day.
Thanks very much, Nick. Cheers. All the best, and bye.